Commanders running back Brian Robinson will help you win your dynasty leagues in 2024. We'll explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. Kate, what is on tap for today's show?
All right, Marcus, we got a new batch of Dynasty ADP, and I thought it would be a worthwhile exercise to go back and take a look. Let's see, outside of the top 30 running backs in Dynasty ADP, who could actually lead their team's backfield and pose an immense value for Dynasty managers here in 2024. Now, we're putting together the show and pitching some names. And I got to say, Marcus, you dove head first with this guy. And I'm out on this guy. So I'm going to need you to make your case. Who is your number one running back being valued outside of the top 30 in Dynasty? Who you think?
I know.
Who will lead their team's respective backfield in 2024? Give it to me.
I think Brian Robinson for the Washington Commanders is one of the best values, not just at the running back position right now, but just all in dynasty football. There's so many things that went well for him this offseason. Like, number one, the switch from Sam Howell to Jayden Daniels, I think is going to be massive. You go from a quarterback who was mostly a stationary pocket passer to now somebody who gives you some dual threat abilities. We know how much that helps running backs when you have the threat of a quarterback that can take off. You go from Eric Bieniemy, who is one of the pass happiest offensive coordinators in the league, to Cliff Kingsbury, who runs a wide open offense, but actually runs the ball a lot more than you would expect. And then I just like Brian Robinson's talent. I think he's a very good player. We saw him improve on almost all of the numbers across the board last year, 1,100 rushing yards, 1,100 total yards. I look at this new offense for Washington, and you go back and you look at what Cliff did with Arizona, like in 2021. That was the year that James Conner had 18 total touchdowns. And even in the next year, 2022, the year that Kyler Murray got hurt, James Conner had 8 touchdowns. You're talking about 26 touchdowns for 2 years from a 26, 27-year-old James Conner. I think Brian Robinson can do that and so much more. I absolutely love him right now. And he's being drafted as RB33. Sign me up.
I mean, I don't want to put a huge damper on your excitement for
Lay it
Brian
on me. I'm ready. I can handle it.
Now, like, obviously, he's been one of the most exciting stories in the NFL. His return, in 2022 after being shot in the preseason, like the story is unbelievable. Making his return to the football field, didn't have the most efficient rookie campaign, did improve, albeit slightly here in 2023, 4.1 yards per attempt. As opposed to 3.9, which he had in his rookie season. Although, Marcus, I'll say Najee Harris averaged 4.1 yards per attempt, and you weren't overly happy with Najee Harris's production. So I'm going to call your bluff there. But
fine.
I'm going to say, I think my biggest concern comes from the fact that we actually saw a decrease in overall usage for Brian Robinson in this year where he was mostly healthy, played 15 games, saw a decrease in terms of total touches per game, 17.8 touches per game as a rookie, down to 14.3 per game as a second-year player in the league. Saw a pretty significant drop-off in terms of rush attempts per game as well, though he did see an uptick in team target share. Now, here's my question. I do think Jayden Daniels is going to be a good thing for this offense. I think he's going to be a great thing for this running game. But you have that passing production, which I think was very essential to Brian Robinson's floor. Like, he only had 733 rushing yards of that 1,100 total yard production. Almost 400 of his yards came as a receiving back. And Marcus, they brought in Austin Eckler, who I think that's probably the only role we're going to pin him in here in 2023. I don't think anybody's expecting him to be a first and second down running back. So, like, if the receiving work isn't there, and then we see that continued decrease in production as a rusher or opportunities, and then there's the fact I don't even know if he's the best running back on his team.
Oh.
Who across the board, Marcus, was pretty much more efficient than Brian Robinson in his rookie season. Rodriguez outplayed him in terms of PFF rushing grade, yards per carry, missed forced tackle rate, yards after contact per attempt, first down and touchdown percentage on touches. What am I missing here?
I think Robinson is just a better player. And I understand the concerns about the usage. I'm going to chalk that up to Eric Bieniemy just being the pass happiest offensive coordinator in the league. I think Cliff is going to be a little bit more balanced. And I agree with you about the receiving thing. Like I won't be shocked if we see Brian Robinson's passing game production get cut in half. And now he's down to 200 yards or maybe 250 yards. So like I'll concede that. I think that's probably the only spot that Austin Eckler will contribute. I also just think there's a chance that Austin Eckler is dust at this point, and he's just beyond the point of being an NFL contributor. To me, it's the touchdown upside. We saw when Cliff was the head coach with the Cardinals with Kyler Murray, again, another very athletic dual threat quarterback. They were still running the ball inside the 5-yard line at a higher clip than any other team in the league. And I think Brian Robinson is a good short yardage and red zone goal line running back. I think he's going to get all that work because I know Austin Eckler is not going to do that. I don't think Chris Rodriguez is going to do that either. And I certainly don't think Jaden Daniels, who it's a stretch to think he's 200 pounds, if they're going to want him to do a lot of the heavy lifting inside the 5-yard line either. So I just think there's a very good chance that we could get a 1,200 yard, maybe let's say 1,300 yard total season from Brian Robinson and double-digit touchdowns. And if you're getting that guy after the top 30 running backs, I think that he can be a viable RB2 for most of the season.
He is currently being drafted as RB33 in the May edition of Dynasty Startup ADP. A couple of trades here that we have seen just here in the last week. Brian Robinson straight up for Deontay Johnson.
I mean, that probably depends on roster construction, but I probably would lean Deontay actually there.
Okay. Brian Robinson in a 4th round pick in 2025 for the 201 in this year's draft and a 2025 2nd round pick. So 201, we might be considering these are some guys that were available at the 201 in some of my startup drafts. Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, Keon Coleman. Would you prefer the package of Brian Robinson in a 2025 4th or one of those assets in a 2nd round pick next year?
I'd take the picks. I think that one's pretty easy.
All right.
Maybe dynasty managers are valuing Brian Robinson a little too much right now.
Maybe. And I think that's very fair. I just think there's a lot of question marks about what this offense is going to look like, how much passing work is even going to be available. And if he sees a decrease in that share, I am concerned even further. And I'm going to be honest, I just liked what we saw out of Chris Rodriguez there as a rookie, as evidenced by the fact that he was pretty much more efficient in like every single category.
He just didn't play as much though.
That's fine. But if he does eat into that workload, which I think, Austin Eckler, for as much as I'm going to peg him for 3rd down work, I still think he's going to get a portion of carries, even if it's insignificant. And all of these, Chris Rodriguez, he gets a portion of the carries. You see a decrease in the work for Brian Robinson in the passing game. Like, all of those little things add up to my concerns for Brian Robinson, but there's no doubt that he's going to have the opportunity to lead this backfield in 2024.
I'm still buying Brian Robinson. I love him. I think he's going to have a big season, and it costs you nothing to go get him. So go get Brian Robinson. All right, let's talk about some other running backs that are being drafted outside the top 30 that could help you win your dynasty leagues this season. We will get to more next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. We've got the NFL schedule release, which has been kind of slowly trickling out over the last couple of days. I can't wait to go to Cowboys Browns week 1. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to try to make it up to some Bills games. We've got some awesome Bills games on the slate. And of course, we've got Kate Steelers against my Cowboys in Pittsburgh. Might have to go to that one. With killer last minute deals, listen, Gametime is the place to go get your tickets. You can save up to 60% off buying last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater events near you. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Kate, there's a running back from the NFC South that you would like to discuss. Who is it, and tell us why?
It's Kendre Miller, running back for the New Orleans Saints, who, I'm going to be honest, did not have the rookie season that anybody had hoped. There was going to be tremendous opportunity in that 2023 season, given the suspension of Alvin Kamara. And unfortunately, I don't think he was healthy enough to take full advantage of that opportunity. But I do think heading into year 2, and given the contract situation with Alvin Kamara, which, his contract is kind of a mess right now. He's got 2 years left on his deal. With a post June 1 trade or release, they can save a significant amount of money against their cap, which they need to do at this point, Marcus. I know that you look at Alvin Kamara and he is a pinnacle of your football team and he has been a foundational player, plays a key role in the passing game, but it is very hard to justify that kind of money for a guy who has shown tremendous, decline. And that's all I'm going to say. But I rewatched the tape from his final game here in 2021 or 2023 with Kendre Miller. He had dealt with a knee injury last year, finally returned for week 7 or week 18. And the tape, I was enamored, Marcus, with what we saw out of Kendre Miller in terms of toughness and ability to look like he could potentially lead a backfield here in 2024.
Yeah, so I agree with almost everything you said. Alvin Kamara actually just wrote a piece for the 33rd team about 7 notable players that should be released before week 1. Alvin Kamara was at the top of this list. He's been an awesome player for the last 7 years now for the Saints. Racked up over 10,000 career yards from scrimmage, but his yards per carry over the last 3 years is, I believe, 3.9. Not great. They've also have other dudes in the backfield, not just Kendre Miller, but they signed Jamal Williams last offseason. They hardly used him at all. And he could be a really good between the tackles grinder, to pair with Kendre Miller. Miller was hardly used last year. Now he was dealing with the knee injury, and that's obviously a little bit of a concern here, but I think Miller has all of the traits to be an every down back. I don't know how spectacular he's going to be or how dynamic he'll be as a runner, but on an offense that I think is going to be pretty solid, I want Kendre Miller on my team.
Yeah, I think honestly, coming into this year, you kind of have to evaluate Kendre Miller as almost like a rookie, right? He's
Yeah.
21 years old. I think we can pretty much write off that 2023 season, but like let's go back to his final season at TCU, right? 81st percentile in PFF rushing grade, 90th percentile in among running backs with a 31% missed forced tackle rate,
Mhm.
averaged 3.64 yards after contact per attempt. That ranked in the 71st percentile for running backs. Was also productive as a receiver, 98th percentile with a 56% missed forced tackle rate on receptions. Like, I think that there is a total role here for Kendre Miller. I think that, again, if you're projecting Alvin Kamara, like every time I tweet about Kendre Miller, somebody says, but did Alvin Kamara die? No, but you can't construct your roster, your real life NFL roster based on the feels. We've seen every single season over the last 3 years a decline in yards after contact per attempt.
Yeah.
Again, yet another season with sub 4 yard per carry average. Like, continuing to lose breakaway yardage. Like, I just can't figure out any sort of stat that would make you enamored with keeping Alvin Kamara on that roster for the cost.
And maybe what ends up happening is the Saints bring back all three of these running backs early in the season. And then I don't know how you feel about the Saints, but I don't think they're going to be the most competitive team in the NFC. Maybe that's when an Alvin Kamara trade opens up and there's a contender that wants to bring him in to be part of a backfield. But it doesn't make any sense to me to let Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams lead a 8 and 9 Saints team that's clearly going nowhere. Like, go play the young kids. Like, figure out what we're doing here. They're in so much. They have such big cap problems right now that why not see what the young guys can do, and can you develop the roster that way? I think it makes logical sense to allow Kendre Miller to take over this job and be the lead running back for at least most of the season.
I have a question for you. So let's say Kendre Miller coming out of TCU, let's say like pretend last year didn't happen. Let's pretend Kendre Miller is a rookie running back who just got drafted to the Saints, which, to be clear, at 21 years old at this point, still younger than a lot of these running backs in this draft class. Where would he rank among the 2024 rookies after we know landing spot?
I think Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson are still 1 and 2, but then,
Yes. I think you could make the argument that Kendre Miller would be the RB3 in this class.
Yeah, I think you're between Blake Corum and Marshawn Lloyd and Jalen Wright. Like, he's certainly in that conversation. And the thing is, those guys are all being drafted ahead of him, right? So why not go out and get Kendre Miller? It's not going to cost you anything. RB46. You've got late day 3 running backs like Kamani Vidal going ahead of Kendre Miller. Like, that's asinine. Kendre
Miller has that 3rd round draft capital too. Let's not forget that. Like, come on, y'all. What are we doing?
All right. He's not the only running back, though, that we really like this year that could potentially help you win your dynasty leagues. Let's get to one more in the AFC North next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and in the NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. You can still go bet who you think is going to win the NBA championship as well as the Stanley Cup. We've got the NFL Week 1 lines for the games that have been announced. They're already up on FanDuel. I believe the Cowboys are 1-point underdogs against the Browns in Cleveland. So go check out those as well. Go check out the futures lines for the NFL. Again, now that the NFL schedule release is going to be happening on Wednesday night, we're going to actually have some change in some of the odds. So go check all of that good stuff out at FanDuel.com. Make sure you're using that promo code /LockedOn and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are discussing 3 running backs that you can get outside of the top 30 in Dynasty leagues that are going to help you win your leagues. And Kate, you and I, we had some disagreements in the first two, maybe a little bit. This next one, we're in sync here. Tell us about Zach Moss.
Let's go. Zach Moss. This is finally the opportunity I've been waiting for. I've been a huge Zach Moss fan since he came out of Utah. And I mean, it took us a little while to get there, but this is our time to shine, I think, officially. It is here. Now, there was a lot of, I think, excitement last year when he stepped in for Jonathan Taylor, performed extremely well when asked to step in amidst a start from Jonathan Taylor on the pup list. Zach Moss, weeks 2 through 5, he was on a 17-game pace for almost 1,900 rushing yards, 300 receiving yards, 17 touchdowns. And
Is that good?
It's hashtag good. Averaged over 20 fantasy points per game in those opportunities without Jonathan Taylor on the field. And I do think that those few games earned him this opportunity here with the Cincinnati Bengals. They traded away Joe Mixon. Pretty much it's Chase Brown going into his second season and Zach Moss. And I do think that all things considered, Marcus, I'm going to take Zach Moss over Chase Brown, who I think is the more proven of these two running backs. I think Moss is an excellent back in terms of like a volume guy. He's a guy that you want to get more touches and consistent touches because of his rushing style. He's more of a bruiser. He can wear down opposing defenses in a way that I don't know that Chase Brown is going to do with his speed. I think the speed component is definitely going to make him more of a change of pace running back. Do you think there's any chance that Chase Brown is actually the guy? Because I feel like I've kind of written that off as a foregone conclusion. He is the backup running back for me.
Yeah, I think there's a chance. Again, I'm going to promote my work on 33rd Team. I just wrote an article over there on 4 breakout candidates at the running back position. Chase Brown and Brian Robinson were both included in that list. Yeah, I think there's a chance that Chase Brown ends up being the Austin Eckler for the Chargers, where maybe this year it's like a 50-50 split. But by year 3, which again, this is year 2 for Chase Brown, it's his backfield and Zach Moss is kind of the change of pace, goal line, short yardage back. But the price is so cheap for both of these players. We have Zach Moss being drafted as RB36, Chase Brown being drafted at RB44, that I'm just going to buy both. And now I have the Bengals backfield, and a backfield that's been incredibly productive over the last couple of years. Even Joe Mixon, who I don't think you and I have loved what we've seen from Joe Mixon, has been like a top 12, fantasy running back every single year that he's healthy. So why not just grab both of these guys, see how the new offense under Zach Taylor kind of figures things out. And then if Chase Brown is a guy that only gets 4 or 5 touches, and it's Zach Moss, just play Moss. If it's Brown that ends up becoming the more dynamic option and he's the one that's getting 15 or 16 touches a game, play him. I want both of these guys on my team because the cost is so cheap and they're going to be on a really good offense.
I think that's fair. I will note Zach Moss did, obviously these are 2 different offenses, but Moss outplayed Chase Brown in terms of PFF rushing grade, missed forced tackle rate, yards per attempt average over the course of the season. First down, touchdown rate on rush attempts, had a lower stuff rate. And I think the biggest question mark for me, Marcus, is like, how do we project Chase Brown as an every down back for this team when he's never played more than 18 snaps in a game?
I don't see any way that Chase Brown starts the year as an every down back. I do think there's a chance, though, that we get to middle part of the season and it's Chase Brown whose role is kind of locked in every week. And it's Zach Moss, who is a little bit more up and down depending on the game script. I just won't be surprised if Chase Brown is the outlet receiver for Joe Burrow. And rather than Joe Mixon and Tyler Boyd kind of getting all those dump off receptions, now it's Chase Brown. And now you're talking about somebody who's getting 5 for 60 every week as a receiver on top of 35 rushing yards. And now he's a flex play. However, I do think it's going to be Moss that opens the season as the starter. And I think this offense is going to be really good, which is going to lead to a lot of touchdown potential. Yes. And we've seen that Zach Taylor loves to run the ball inside the 5-yard line. So I think it's possible that both of these players are viable fantasy options.
I'm happy you mentioned that propensity to run inside the 5 because I do have one more stat that I think like is going to put, even if you think Chase Brown leads this team in carries, I don't think Chase Brown projects as the back inside the 5. Joe Mixon last year had 38 carries inside the 5. Brown had 0.
And we should
Chase
mention,
Brown had just one single carry inside the 10 even.
and
That's Zach Moss's job.
we should mention that this Bengals offense was basically broken the first month and a half of the season because Joe Burrow wasn't healthy. And then for the last, was it 7 games of the year, it was Jake Browning playing. So if Joe Burrow plays a majority of the season this year, I would expect the total number of carries inside the 5 to go up. And that could really benefit Zach Moss.
I'm all in. I'm
in on both these guys. I want both of these running backs on my team for the price. So go buy Zach Moss, go buy Chase Brown, go buy Brian Robinson. He's going to help you win your league. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there as well. On tomorrow's show, we've got Matt Williamson answering your Twitter questions, so make sure you tune in for that. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.